Today, we set the course for a new era of accountability in Texas government. This is the first meeting of the House Committee on Delivery of Government Efficiency, and I want to thank Speaker Burrows for his foresight in creating this committee and entrusting us with this vital charge. Assisting us with our work this session will be our Committee Director, Katie Aldridge, and our Assistant Committee Clerk, Matthew Oshman. Please don't hesitate to reach out to them with any committee questions. For too long, government inefficiency has been tolerated, accepted, and ignored. That ends now. For the first time, this legislature has established a dedicated standing committee with the authority to cut through bureaucracy, eliminate waste, and hold state agencies to the highest standards of performance, transparency, and integrity. We will not be passive observers. We will be enforcers of accountability. Now, the road ahead will not be easy. Our 22-month agenda is ambitious, because it must be. We will expose bloated government, dismantle outdated regulations that stifle economic growth, and eradicate fraud and abuse wherever we find it. This committee will operate with precision. At times, we'll use a scalpel, carefully dissecting inefficiencies to make government work smarter. At other times, we will wield a sledgehammer, tearing down systemic waste and corruption that may have gone unchallenged. Let there be no mistake, change is coming, and it will be swift and decisive. Our work will be thorough. Public hearings will shine a light on failures. Legislative proposals will emerge from this committee to drive reform. Investigations will hold bad actors accountable. We are here to advocate for the taxpayer, the small business owner, the retiree on a fixed income, and the Texan, who depends on public services that are too often compromised by mismanagement and negligence. Today marks the beginning. We will examine the tools at our disposal: procurement, contracting oversight, auditing mechanisms, and data-driven accountability measures. We will evaluate every tip, every concern, and every opportunity to root out inefficiency and corruption. And we invite the public to join us in this effort. We have established a direct line of communication at DOGE at housetexas.gov, DOGE at housetexas.gov, where cases of waste, fraud, and abuse can be reported for our investigation. Additionally, I'm proud to announce that we're finalizing the onboarding of an independent expert who will leverage artificial intelligence and sophisticated data analytics to examine treasury records, contracting practices, and key financial data. This will give us unprecedented insight into how taxpayer dollars are spent and where they're being wasted. This committee is not here to observe. We are here to act. We will challenge the status quo, demand accountability, ensure that Texas government serves the people as it was intended to. Their work begins now. Thank you, members. Does anybody have a statement that they'd like to make? Vice Chair Baljani.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Committee on Delivery of Government Efficiency. I want to thank Chairman Capriglione for his leadership and Speaker Burrows for recognizing the need for this committee. Our task is clear: modernizing state government, eliminating efficiencies, and increasing transparency and accountability. As the 8th largest economy in the world, with the climate of innovation and doing more with less, Texas can lead the way in responsible, efficient government. Ensuring tax money is being responsibly should be a bipartisan goal. But let me be clear, my focus is not about cutting essential services or devaluing hardworking public servants. I'm here to work with you, not against you, to improve how we serve Texans. Innovation thrives on collaboration. By working with business leaders, researchers, and universities, we can develop practical solutions that strengthen our economy and keep Texas at the forefront of technological advancement. We also welcome collaboration with the public. As Chairman Capriglione said, if Texans see fraud and abuse, we want to hear about it. I look forward to working with my colleagues, those with diverse expertise, and will help craft a bipartisan, effective solution to make our government more efficient. We have important work ahead, and I'm eager to get started. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other comments before we start? Okay, hearing none. All right, so to begin our hearing, we will hear from 3 state agencies listed under the committee's jurisdiction. That's the Sunset Advisory Commission, the Department of Information Resources, and the Texas Space Commission. The agencies will all give an overview of their missions and responsibilities and offer insight into their work and impact on the state. The chair calls Eric Beverly. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as Eric Beverly on behalf of the Sunset Advisory Commission, and that you will be testifying neutrally. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Capriglione, Vice Chair Bojani, and members. For the record, my name is Eric Beverly. I'm the Executive Director of the Sunset Advisory Commission. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and we look forward to working with your committee. We definitely see ourselves as accountability partners with y'all, and we look forward to exploring new ways to bring value to the people of Texas. I'm going to start I'll be referring to a slide deck that I provided to the committee. The Sunset Advisory Commission is overseen by a 12-member commission. The Lieutenant Governor appoints 5 senators and 1 public member, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives appoints 5 state representatives and 1 public member. The elected members of our commission serve 4-year terms. The public members serve 2-year terms. The chair and the vice chair position rotate back and forth between the House and the Senate. This cycle, it's been the House's opportunity to lead through the chairmanship. We have a small staff of 32 that supports the commission. Next slide shows our existing Sunset Commission members. Our chair is Representative Keith Bell, and our vice chair is Senator Tam Parker. On the next slide, what is Sunset? Sunset is an effective legislative tool for evaluating the effectiveness of state agencies. Sunset works by automatically abolishing an agency unless the legislature decides to continue it. Sunset asks the questions, is the agency still needed? And how well is the agency working for Texans? Sunset has resulted in less regulation, improved agency performance, and greater government accountability. Moving to the next slide, there's no doubt that the face of state government looks different today due to the Sunset process. Since Sunset was created in 1977, the agency and the process have significantly streamlined and improved Texas government. We have reduced the size of Texas government by abolishing 42 agencies and programs and consolidating 53 agencies and programs. We've saved taxpayers money. $1 billion in state and federal savings and revenue gains since 1985, resulting in an ROI, a return on investment, of $16 for every dollar appropriated to the Sunset Commission. We have conducted 600 reviews of state agencies and programs, and 80% of the Sunset Commission's recommendations to the legislature have been adopted across time. Next slide, what we do. 3 main phases: evaluation, deliberation, and action. During the evaluation phase, Sunset staff receives input from the agency stakeholders and the public. We perform extensive research and analysis to evaluate the agency and identify problems. We develop recommendations to address those problems, and we prepare a report that is for consideration by the Sunset Commission. The Sunset Commission handles the deliberation. They hold a public hearing on the staff report to receive testimony from the agency, stakeholders, and the public, and then they hold a second meeting to make decisions on that staff report. At that meeting, the Sunset Commission can decide to adopt, not adopt, or modify Sunset staff recommendations, and they can also offer their own new recommendations based on their experience and testimony that's been received. Finally is legislative action. So a bill is introduced for each agency, and it goes through the normal legislative process for any of the statutory recommendations that we make. And of course, the public may participate during that process. Next slide. Sunset review criteria and recommendations. Sunset staff focuses on process, how an agency performs its functions, not policy, which is the domain of the legislature. We apply criteria that are spelled out in Chapter 325 of the Government Code. That's our Texas Sunset Act. And we look at fairness, effectiveness, and efficiency, transparency, and accountability. We typically provide 3 sorts of recommendations. We'll make statutory recommendations that require a change in law, a management recommendation that can be implemented by the agency once the Sunset Commission has adopted the recommendation, and then appropriative recommendations that are made for consideration by House Appropriations and Senate Finance. Next slide, agencies under review. Have 131 agencies under review between now and 2035. Most are executive branch agencies. A few agencies are reviewed but not subject to abolishment, An example this time would be the Texas Ethics Commission, which is constitutionally created, and river authorities that are subject to sunset review but not abolishment. We do conduct some special purpose or limited reviews. This time we conducted a special purpose review of seller disclosures for the Texas Real Estate Commission. Universities and courts are exempt from sunset review, and the legislature sets our schedule. Y'all determine who we review and when we do it. Most agencies are reviewed on a 12-year cycle, and on average we review about 22 agencies per biennium. Some agencies are reviewed by the same team. So this cycle we had one team that reviewed the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, Board of Pardons and Paroles, Correctional Managed Healthcare Committee, and the Windham School District. On the next slide, you can see an overview of the agencies that were under review this cycle. Moving to the next slide, this is the major fiscal implications of our work. The top line number is that we identified nearly $147 million in savings that could be achieved over the next 5 fiscal years, primarily through our review of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The next slide, I wanted to highlight that there are statutory mechanisms to ensure that there is coordination among legislative agencies. I'll draw your attention to the second bullet from the bottom, which is section 326.003. That creates an audit coordination meeting, sunset. The state auditor's office and the legislative budget board meet quarterly. That concludes my prepared remarks, Chairman, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you or the committee may have.
Sure, thank you. Members, any
Certainly.
questions? Representative Tinderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, sir, thank you.
So of the 131 agencies, can you tell me, for example, is TEA on that list, do you know?
Yes, sir.
Do you know when the last time is that they've been audited?
It's been a while. And with the last time that we looked at them, we were not able to get a sunset bill.
So how often are they supposed to be done? Every 10 or 12 years?
The ideal is 12 years. There is some variation in how often agencies are
Would it
actually.
surprise you if I told you it's been decades that I can find? Meaning, we looked for 40 years, and I couldn't find one time that it had been sunset. So I'm asking.
It's been reviewed more recently than 40 years.
How long
And
do you think it
I can
was?
look in my book here. I'll find it.
So while you're looking for that,
Yes, sir.
statutorily, they're supposed to be done. So when they're not done, can you explain why they may not be done? And I understand the workload is pretty hefty, and when you do
They-
22 at a time, I understand that's a lot.
Yes, sir. They were last reviewed in 2015.
Okay,
TEA was.
and how much was it? When were they reviewed before that? Do you know?
I don't have that, but I'll be happy to provide it to you in the committee.
Okay. Are there additional agencies out there that are not on this list?
Yes, sir.
And so, if I understand correctly, we put in the statute whether they should or shouldn't be done under sunset.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? I'm not looking for a list today, but are there agencies you think we should actually be doing that may not have been legislatively placed under sunset? Do you think it would be a good idea for us to seriously consider looking sunset-wise at some of these other agencies that are not on that list?
Certainly could be a good idea. There could be potential savings and efficiencies that would be gained, and we'll be happy to take a look at any that are not subject to sunset review.
How often does your organization determine that an agency might not need to exist anymore? Is it like just a rough estimate? Is it 5% of the time, 20% of the time?
Percentage-wise, it would be more difficult to, we could look at that.
Okay.
But I can tell you that we have, just in the last 12 years, recommended abolishing 8 different agencies.
Okay. And then how often does the agency recommend, and I'm just looking at close guesstimates, at
Yes, sir.
increasing an agency, and how often do they recommend decreasing an agency?
Our focus really is on right-sizing an agency.
Right.
Rather than expanding it. I can think of an example from last cycle. So I rejoined Sunset in August of 2023. So last legislative session, there were some funding appropriations to improve conditions at TJJD and the Public Utility Commission. So
Okay.
you might consider that an expansion. So that was not necessarily in terms of adding new duties, but adding FTEs and funding.
Is it fair to say that if we do increase the number of agencies that you would have to do, that it would mean that your organization would potentially have to increase because of the quantity of work it would create?
It could. We're always looking at opportunities to consolidate agencies and functions.
Okay.
For example, in 2033, a lot of occupational licensing entities are lined up for sunset review,
Okay.
and those certainly present an option for consolidation.
Okay. Well, thank you for those answers. And if I was wrong on the TEA thing, I apologize.
No worries, sir.
But I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. We couldn't find it. I think the goal of the committee is obviously to find efficiencies and save money. But I personally understand that if we have to increase the number of agencies that have to be reviewed, that we might have to potentially increase your full-time employees and stuff like that. So
Yes, sir.
thank you for answering my questions.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Beverly. I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman, that this is our first, Sunset Commission is our first panelist, and I have a series of questions as well. First one being, can you explain how the sunset process has contributed to reducing the size of Texas government and saving taxpayer money over the years?
Sure. So I would refer back to my slide where I talk about the number of agencies that have been abolished, agencies and programs. So I have that as slide 5.
Okay.
So since 1977, 42 agencies and programs have been abolished, and then 53 agencies and programs have been transferred or consolidated. So those are the top line numbers about how we've been able to do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know, and I appreciate the word consolidate that you used. And the next question is, how does the Sunset Commission coordinate its efforts with other legislative agencies like the State Auditor's Office and the Legislative Budget Board?
Yes, ma'am. So there are a number of ways that we coordinate, and I'll turn to, I don't think the slide is numbered, but it's the second to the last page, titled Coordination by Legislative Agencies. So we work closely with the State Auditor's Office. So when we conduct a review of a state agency, there are statutory and there are management actions that have been adopted. So we will examine the implementation by the agency of the statutory recommendations, and we partner with the State Auditor's Office, and they select, based on a prioritization scheme, management actions that need to be reviewed to ensure that the agency has complied. And they publish a report, and then we incorporate that report by reference and bring that information together in a single document. And then that is presented to the Sunset Commission at the January meeting, which is the last meeting that the Sunset Commission holds, to ensure that there is a public opportunity for commission members to ensure that compliance has been achieved, and if they have questions about why compliance has not been achieved, that they can hold agencies to account.
Wonderful, thank you. You
Yes, ma'am.
answered that next question for me because it dealt with determining, you know, which agencies are reviewed in each cycle. I'll move on. Can you discuss any challenges or limitations the Sunset Commission faces in conducting its reviews?
I would say that agencies have a lot of data, right? And so one of the first things that I did when I was appointed is I hired a data analyst, data officer, because we, as Sunset, have increasingly been asking agencies to make data-driven decisions. And so I wanted to ensure that we have the internal capacity to evaluate data and understand whether data is being housed appropriately. We have a charge to ensure that data is not to find out whether data is being sold. And so I think that has been one of the challenges. And I would say that routinely we find data issues across agencies of all sizes. So it's not a small agency, mid-sized agency, or large agency issue.
Great. And so my last question is, how does the sunset process contribute to improving agency performance and government accountability?
I think it provides for a routine review and assurance that state agencies are complying with the laws that y'all have passed. We also make sure that agencies are complying with their 4-year rule review process. And if a decision is made to continue an agency rather than abolish it, the focus is on ensuring that that agency continues with improvements. That's our focus.
So thank you for that. And I think, I know I said that was my last question, but I have to double back to the one that you sort of answered. The last part, and I'll read the full question, but the last part of the question deals with why some agencies are reviewed more frequently than others. And so the first part is, what is the process of determining which agencies are reviewed in each cycle, and why are some agencies reviewed more frequently than others?
Sure. So the 12-year review cycle is sort of the ideal,
Okay.
right? Agencies, the legislature sets the schedule for reviewing agencies. So if there is legislative concern that an agency may not be performing well, they can be moved up, right? So if you were concerned about somebody that wasn't due for sunset review until 2035, and you wanted us to review the next cycle, the legislature might decide to change the sunset date from 2035 to 2027 to enable us to look at them next time. Sometimes agencies are moved off so that they can be reviewed alongside other agencies that might have similar responsibilities. That can afford an opportunity to look for duplication of effort and ensure that all of that information comes before the Sunset Commission and the legislature at the same time. Did that answer you?
It does.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Curry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beverly, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do. Appreciate how big of a job it is as well. It's
Likewise.
it's
sir.
easy to point fingers, and it's easy to point back at things, and you have a hard job to do, and we know that. So thank you for that.
Thanks, sir.
I'm going to go back to something that you talked about, which was data and the difficulty of finding data and so on and so forth. It is my understanding that each agency keeps its own data at the moment, that there's really not one single repository, correct?
They do keep their own data. Depending on how they have it structured, it's possible that a vendor could hold some of the data. The Department of Information Resources does have a portal, and there is a requirement to share some data. I think it's at least 3 data sets, and Executive Director Crawford could probably speak more eloquently to that when she's up. But,
Okay.
So there is a mechanism for at least some data sets that agencies control to be shared and made publicly available.
Okay.
But data could be held in a variety of ways.
So then when you were talking about problems with data at times, can you give me an example or two of what kind of problems are you talking about specifically?
Be happy to. I think it really starts at a fundamental level in terms of data governance, right? Thinking about what kind of data that you take in, what kind of data you specifically don't need to take in, right? What you might be asking for things that are creating burdens on regulated entities, but the information is not necessary to your administrative function. And then that data often exists in legacy databases, right? So they may have been programmed in COBOL or Fortran or some other system or some vendor provided solution. And so if you don't have quality assurance, quality control over your data, if you don't have data validation, then the data sets that you have and rely on to make decisions aren't necessarily of the best quality. And that's a concern for me because I've seen it in my experience on the executive side. And so something you have to be very mindful about.
So in your opinion then, it would be a good thing to streamline the way that data is deposited in such a way that to make your job easier and your staff's job easier, correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, we can access data. We can get access to information. The important thing, I'm sort of more agnostic because there might be a business case for an agency to control some data, depending on the confidentiality of the data or whatever the concerns are. But I do want high quality data so that y'all as decision makers can rely on that data. And what I have seen time and time again is that is not necessarily the case. So that's part of our work, and part of where I think that we can add increasing value across time is just really looking and making sure that when you receive numbers in a report that the underlying data are accurate.
So do you, and I agree with that. I mean, one of the problems is in having a business background and spending a lot of time I'm a data-driven geek, and I like numbers and I like to
I do
see
too.
how things work, and I love measuring things. So consequently, I've struggled with programs we finally ended up taking most of our data, large amounts of data, and putting them in relational databases and so on and so forth, so that we had a more broad access to that. When I'm talking about streamlining, that's kind of what I'm talking about doing, is being able to have it in a format where you can more easily use it and access it, and maybe our committee could as well.
Right.
Do you use artificial intelligence now on anything that you know of?
So the answer is no. I would love to. But for example, Microsoft, we have the Microsoft suite as part of our thing. We can't use Copilot right now because it hasn't gone through the proper vetting. Okay. That would increase efficiency for my team, right? Because we meet with a lot of agencies and we summarize our meetings, and so my team could be more agile if we had that capacity. But I am excited by the possibility of having some sort of sandbox that we could work in, do it in a safe manner. One of my concerns about AI is we deal with confidential information. That information is critical to our process, because if there's somebody who's a whistleblower or has a concern or has ideas to make things more effective and efficient, I want to ensure that the information they share with us remains confidential.
Right.
Because that enables us to be successful in our process.
I'm sure that'll be, obviously with this committee, that'll be a priority as well, to make sure that whatever happens is in those fronts is properly guarded.
And the chairman
I only have
has
a couple of
legislation
questions
that would enable us to potentially make better use of AI. So thank you for that.
So this may be I have two other questions, then I'll leave you alone. But the first one is if there was a commission or a executive branch area that y'all wanted to look into, or that we wanted to look into, such as, I'll pick one, Operation Lone Star, relatively new, a lot of money flowing through. Mm-hmm. Does that go through 326.003, and do y'all decide that, or how does that ask occur?
So if the decision were made, we have done Sunset has done special reviews of entities before. So we've looked at the Port of Houston, we've looked at transportation entities. So we have the ability, if we are assigned the work, to do that look.
So who assigns it is my question.
The legislature does. It would need to be passed through legislation.
Okay. And then kind of final question, and this is more of a general question, but in your reviews, you've obviously done this for a while, and you've done a lot of them, and we appreciate that. So
Thanks,
as you're looking at these various agencies, and you see that they all have a contracting division, they all have an HR department, they all have a marketing group or some kind of a marketing piece, do y'all look at the possibility of consolidating single functions into one area of the state? Do y'all ever review it that way?
I think on the contracting question, I think there was a requirement to look at contracting functions more generally. I don't have the specific dates on that, and I can follow up with you on that. But for example, this time we looked, when we were reviewing the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, at some of the HR issues they were encountering there, but we didn't look at outsourcing or consolidation of the function. Is that responsive to your question?
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not about outsourcing, so I'm not a huge fan of that myself. But okay, you answered my question. That's fine. Thank you very much. No further question.
Great, thank you. Representative Rodriguez Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your testimony today. I would love to learn more about exploring waste, fraud, and abuse under Operation Lone Star, and I hope that our legislature would really be committed to the transparency there, knowing how much we've spent, billions and billions over the past few years. My question to you is regarding the commission. How do we know, or what is the process in ensuring that commissioners or members that are part of the Sunset Commission don't have any ties with any agencies that they themselves are reviewing, or the oversight that they have?
Well, The lieutenant governor and the speaker appoint the members, so that's one check. And then if there were some matter that posed a conflict of interest during voting, they would need to disclose that.
Do you all have a process of how they would disclose that, any conflicts of interest or financial interests, or do you all internally have a process for them, or they just, we hope that they speak up?
I think that's not envisioned in our statute. I can go back and look at that, but with appointments from the lieutenant governor and the speaker's office, they're going to be evaluating, I imagine, a range of things that could include that. But I don't know, and I wouldn't care to speak on their behalf.
So there is no internal process within your organization to ensure that anyone who is part of the commission has any employment interest or vendor interest with any of the agencies that there's oversight. There's nothing specifically that allows for that transparency to happen that you are aware of.
It's up to the members to decide. Members have disclosed conflicts.
Yeah. Yes, it is up to the members to disclose. This cycle, we did have a member who disclosed some potential conflicts of interest. I don't have concerns about that because I think that people have self-reported that information, but that may be something y'all wish to look at. But I hope I've been responsive to your question.
Yes, sir. Moving on to the processes in terms of ensuring efficiency in the different agencies that you all are looking at, how do we know when you looking to cut some of these agencies or cut some of the funding or what have you, that it doesn't increase the workload or undermine any services provided to Texans within those agencies or whatever organization you guys are reviewing? Mm-hmm. What is the process to ensure that the services are still adequately being provided to Texans within those agencies where there is a recommendation to provide some adjustments in funding or what have you?
Mm-hmm. We keep the customer service experience top of mind. Mm-hmm. We are focused on ensuring that the public has access to the government agencies that serve them. So accountability, transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness are the things that we look at to ensure that the public is being served. If the legislature makes a decision to abolish a function mm-hmm. or an activity, then the agency would no longer have the ability to offer that. So there could be, I think I'm answering your question. There could be folks that may have received services or grant funding or contracting opportunities through that function, and if that function is abolished, then there wouldn't be a guarantee of future service or contracting opportunities or grant making.
Well, and in your recommendations, do you all take a look at that, look at the services that are being provided, and making those recommendations and how that impact would be?
We do. We focus on ensuring that the public has access to state government functions, and that state government functions are designed to provide the best value to the public, right, to the taxpayer. So.
And walk me through that process. How do you do that? How do you make sure that the end user is not being impacted? Is there an assessment in the frontline workers to completely understand what that process looks like? Because we see what's happening at the federal mm-hmm. level, where people are getting impacted left and right. We don't even know what that's going to look like, but so many people are hurting. Mm-hmm. How do we know in this process how do we prevent that chaos and that disaster in terms of impacting the end user?
Sure. I can just speak to the Texas process, which is we take in input from the public, from people who are regulated by an agency, people that receive services from an agency. We do that confidentially during the staff review phase, and they can provide their input. They can tell us what's working for them or not working for them. When our Sunset Commission meets, the public also has an opportunity to provide input about the impact of our proposals, of our recommendations on them as members of the public or as members of the regulated community. And then to the extent that there's a legislative change, the public also has the opportunity to weigh in and participate in the legislative process. So there are multiple layers.
Wonderful.
The first part of the process ensures that we can receive candid, just straight from the heart sort of input from people in a confidential manner. And then we can do our due diligence, prove up the problem, and move it through the process that way.
Wonderful. So they not only have it internally with you all when they're going through this recommendation, but also with the legislature as well before there are any final
That's
decisions
right.
being made. Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Representative. Just a quick reminder that in order to speak to the committee, you have to register as a witness before doing so. Representative Tinderholt.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Representative Curry was talking about. I own a company, and I have a fleet vehicle management software that I use. I think it would be really beneficial in an efficiency standpoint to have some of those things for you guys to be looking at efficiencies of sharing some of the software products, some of them off the shelf. If you're looking at HR, if you're looking at payroll, if you're looking at vehicles, do you find that some of the software that you're dealing with, I'm guessing because we don't get to go down and touch this stuff, is some of it truly still from the 90s, some of the software that's being used at the state level?
Or older. And
So could there be, and the chairman and I had talked a little bit about there, could there be potentially efficiencies in revamping the technology that's used at the state level for every organization, and then someone at the state level has visibility of everything, so you don't have to go to the agency. You could literally sit at your desk and have access to, if you do DPS, you could look at all their vehicles, you could look at all of their HOR, you could look at everything from one place. Could there be efficiencies if we were to invest money one time for off-the-shelf solutions that are statewide? Could you see an impact with that?
I could. The most obvious example to me, just based on my background, is occupational licensing. There are a number of solutions that are designed to ensure that occupational license applications and renewals get processed, and there are a variety of software solutions. On the payroll side, there has been a movement with CAPS for payroll and human resources. Some agencies have implemented both. Some are still scheduled for having some of that software implemented. So that is a statewide effort for payroll, and there are people that could probably speak much better to that. But that's one area. But the example for occupational licensing comes to mind.
Well, when I think about vehicles, for instance, DPS we'd use the same product. DPS could go in and only see their vehicles. Department of Transportation could only go in and see theirs, but it's one product.
Mm-hmm.
Huge database behind it. And I think if we did that across the board, it might be something that our committee might want to seriously consider as an upfront investment of totally changing the technology and how the state's functioning at every level.
Mm-hmm.
We literally have to look at every level and bring it into the year of 2025, and we don't have 40 and 50-year-old legacy systems that are out there. I feel like there could be a lot of efficiencies, and what I'm hearing is you tend to agree with that.
Yes, and there, to be fair, there are some mechanisms. So it's the information resources deployment document that is provided. So I may be able to get access to that information, but through the Department of Information Resources for IT, for the landscape of IT and software, they may be better positioned to answer that question because they have documents that are coming in to them, and they're using those to roll up and provide more summative information to the legislature.
I could see your organization being hugely involved in this committee's work because you are one of the only agencies that gets to see and touch every piece and every part of every organization across the state. So you have the knowledge and you have the visibility, and you've seen them all, and you've seen the successes and the failures,
Yes, sir.
and potentially where we could share resources. So thank you very much for what you do. I appreciate you.
Thanks, sir, and look forward to working with the committee. And
Representative King.
Real quick, you were mentioning maybe the desire to acquire some AI software. Would that be something y'all are required to go through DIR for, or will you be going through DIR for the software?
My agency actually receives services through the Texas Legislative Council. They're a great partner. They're just doing their due diligence on, like the co-pilot example.
Okay.
To
Does TLC, do you know if TLC gets do they acquire it through DIR when they're purchasing software?
They may. I'm not apprised of their IT
Understood.
procurement, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Olcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Beverly, for being here today. So I've once I got up in this committee, I've been hearing from lots of people, and one of them has done quite a bit of research, believes that a lot of the waste that's happening at the state level is from the consulting contracts that are done by the various agencies, and that the idea that maybe if some of these agencies were to do more in-house with DIR, for instance, that would pose a potential big saving. Would you agree with that? And could you tell us a little about the consulting contracts and what's your opinion about that?
Sure. So I would hope that agencies are doing an evaluation before they contract out for services, whether it's more effective and efficient and cheaper to do it in-house or to procure a third-party solution. So we do evaluate agency contracting as part of our look. With the DIR review this time, we did identify an opportunity for agencies that are required to participate in the Shared Technology Services Program to, in some cases, obtain contracted assistance through a more cost-effective manner. So we did look at that. But there are a lot of agency functions that have been outsourced or contracted for. So I want to make sure I understand your concern or your interest.
Sure. I'm assuming that one of the reasons why it could be more efficient is if DIR has, because of simply sheer volume, that they might be able to negotiate much better contracts than these agencies going out on their own and using outside sources.
Yes, sir. And DIR can speak to this with more detail, but they certainly do through the co-op program as an example. That's more of a self-serve option that agencies can choose from, and there is a price break that they're able to negotiate as part of that to achieve cost savings for the state.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Alders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beverly, thanks for your work.
Thanks, sir.
You mentioned that universities and courts are exempt from the sunset process. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Considering the amount of funding that our state provides to our universities, I mean, we're sending several $1 billion a year. How are we ensuring that those universities are accountably spending taxpayer dollars? And do you have any recommendations or thoughts on how we might look to modernize and create efficiency and create accountability measures for our universities?
I'll just say, because it's not an area that we focus on as an agency, that my experience there would be perhaps more limited. Be happy to think about it. There would be the appropriations process, right? That's a measure, and then state auditor's office would have the ability to conduct audits. So those are two mechanisms for accountability that I can think off the top. We do review the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, and we also review the Judicial Branch Certification Commission, but we don't review courts or universities.
So you would recommend more of a proactive, or what we currently have is more of a proactive through the appropriations process at the beginning end. We don't have more of a reactive process by which we're evaluating how our funds are being used at the university level.
Right. We don't have a sunset style look at public universities that I'm aware of.
Okay,
and we
thanks.
certainly don't do that activity. Certainly. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? If not, I just have a couple for you really quick.
Yes,
you had
Chairman.
mentioned that over time you've helped in about $1 billion in savings. Would you mind talking about where those savings have been? Like, is it in operations? Has it been in contract oversight? Like, where those savings that you mentioned, at a pie chart, what would it look like?
I'd be happy to provide you with more detail. I think that the last review of the Workforce Commission resulted in some significant revenue gains.
Okay.
Of note, when we deregulate things, it typically costs. So while we focus on our return on investment as a measure of our effectiveness, it's undercut by our work to abolish things. The two aren't mutually exclusive, but that's just a difference. So
Okay.
typically occupational agencies will collect some of that money goes to GR, some of that money is allocated to the agency for their regulation. So when we recommend deregulating something, it does cost. But I'd be happy to provide you with
Okay.
detailed information.
It's just
on
like what
where
those
come
savings
from.
are and how they were realized. The second thing I heard from a couple of members, maybe if you could give us the schedule of whatever the last, but looking forward, who's next on the list and when they would come up and how often they've been reviewed in the past. And then finally, you had just a question when we were talking about data, which of course we want to be able to help with to make sure that the commission gets as much data as possible. And you had mentioned that some of the data is not good data, which is sometimes a euphemism for inaccurate data. So in what ways have you seen that data provided by agencies might be inaccurate?
There are a lot of examples.
Okay.
Just to be candid, lots of examples. Trying to think of. I can go back and look at some of the things that we have reported on, rather than just sort of and provide you some examples of those.
If you would be so kind to show us examples to the committee of where data provided by the agencies is inaccurate.
Yeah. And we do have an infographic that shows our review schedule through 2035, and I'll be happy to share that with the committee in addition to the other items that you asked for.
Great, perfect. Members, any other last questions? If not, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
It's my
Thank
pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and interest, and look forward to working with y'all.
Same here. Thank you. Okay, the chair now calls Amanda Crawford.